The National Center on Improving Literacy presents an Ask an Expert video series, Vision Impairment and Dyslexia. We asked Marnee Loftin, retired psychologist from the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, can students with visual impairments have dyslexia?
This is a question that has been widely debated in the field, whether it can exist, whether it should be identified, etc. I think there's a lot of reasons for the fairly heated discussion. Part of it is that the description and definition of dyslexia has changed over the years. Originally, there was more emphasis on it being the result of some type of faulty visual processing, which made it even more difficult to separate it from children with a visual impairment. But the current emphasis on a neurobiological difficulty makes it very, very clear that students can also have a visual impairment and a form of dyslexia. I think anecdotal data supports it well. Teachers who have worked in the field, evaluators who have worked in the field, have multiple incidents of children that have struggled with reading because of some issue other than their vision. But I think that it has been difficult because, number one, of the lack of research. There's almost no research that's evidence-based that deals with children and with visual impairments and their reading skills. Part of it is because it's a tiny population of students in the United States, and part of it is because it's a terribly complex population. So what you have is roughly 0.5% of the special education population that is represented by students with visual impairments, and complexity that ranges from the etiology being ocular or neurologically based. When did the vision occur? When did the vision loss occur? Is it congenital or adventitious? What type of intervention have they received? And then finally, the reading media. And what you'll find as we discuss this whole issue is that the vast majority of emphasis has been on looking at differences in the process of developing reading skills with people who are Braille readers and then people who have low vision. These people that have low vision may read large print. They may read print with magnification. They may use auditory means, a whole different combination of ways to access media. We'll talk about it solely as students with low vision, but I want you to be aware that there's a broad number of different types of reading media that is subsumed under that category. What we do know about dyslexia and populations is that roughly 5 to 15% of the US are suspected of having some form of dyslexia, some of which has been recognized and some of it has never been formally recognized. Looking at more numbers, we know that 14% of children who are in special ed are there because of difficulties with their educational progress, and that fully 80% of these children are there because of reading disabilities, which represents a huge difficulty in accessing their educational program. When you look at the VI population, we know that a large percentage of them have a neurological basis for their visual impairment, which again, we would hypothesize would contribute to the presence of dyslexia in this population. But few are ever recognized. And I think most importantly, not only do they go unrecognized, but they go without appropriate intervention to help them develop skills. And just like children with no vision problems, the child who is a struggling reader in the first grade is likely to be a struggling reader throughout their educational career without the important intervention that occurs early for children. I think that evaluators, in addition to the confusion about what is dyslexia and how does it relate to visual impairment, that many of them are often really confused by the lack of knowledge. Again, you're looking at a very small population nationally, The odds are slim that people have had any type of training in their professional prep program on how to evaluate children with visual impairments. So there's a lack of knowledge about visual impairments. And specifically, there's a lack of knowledge about that important aspect of how do you develop reading skills in this population? How is it different? How is it the same? Finally, there's much hesitation about what evaluation instruments are available and what is a good process. You know, how does it vary from what you would do with a child with vision? How do you make the best use of what is available? So all of these factors, the lack of information, the confusion about the criteria for dyslexia, and misunderstanding of the development of reading skills all contribute to the lack of evaluation. And again, most importantly, the lack of intervention.
This video is funded by a grant to the National Center on Improving Literacy from the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education in partnership with the Office of Special Education Programs. Award number S283D1600003. The opinions or policies expressed are those of the authors and do not represent views of OESE, OSEP, or the U.S. Department of Education. You should not assume endorsement by the federal government. Copyright 2021, National Center on Improving Literacy.